الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن سار على نهجه وما استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فاتقوا الله أيها الأحباب فقد أمرنا سبحانه وتعالى في تنزيله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون ثم أما بعد. My brothers and sisters, today insha'Allah ta'ala the topic that I have for you is a topic that can never be worn out. It can never be dried down. No matter how many times you hear a topic like this, it should always hit some part of your heart. It should always sink into the deepest part of your life. And the topic, it is none other than the topic of al-akhlaq, the etiquettes and the manners of a believer. Now the first thing that I want to say to you, brothers and sisters, I am not going to tell you the benefits of al-akhlaq, because this is something that should be understood. I am not going to tell you the various ahadith of the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam on the fada'il or the virtues of our manners and etiquettes. Again, this is something that should be fundamentally understood by each and every single one of us. We should all know why we need to be good human citizens of mankind. We should all know why we need to smile, why we need to have good etiquettes, why we need to be caring and loving with each other. But rather, brothers and sisters, today insha'Allah ta'ala, what I will discuss with you are 5 main points insha'Allah. And that is al-akhlaq wal-adab allati yajib ala kulli muslimin an yatamassaka bih. These are the etiquettes and the manners that every single Muslim should hold on to. You should bite on to these mannerisms, these etiquettes, these points that I will mention with you today with all of your abilities, with all of your iman. So let us begin with insha'Allah ta'ala. And brothers and sisters, the manners that we must hold on to live a healthy, to live an obedient life towards Allah Azza wa Jal, they are many. And so insha'Allah, this will be a continuous topic that I will share with you each and every time I stand in front of you insha'Allah. So let us begin ayyuhal ahbab with the first etiquette. Now this is not in any particular order, but rather these are etiquettes based on my own experience. And based on my experience as a da'i, some of the problems that I face in front of my life each and every day. Awalan, brothers and sisters, is that we can disagree. The first etiquette is that we can disagree but still remain brothers and sisters at the end of the day. Recently, 2 days ago, a brother calls me from New York City. And he says to me, Brother Musleh, there is a big problem in our masjid and we need your help. So I said, Tafaddal ya akhi al-kareem, please go ahead, let me do what I can for you. So the brother said to me that one day the imam, he came into the masjid and he said to every one of us that you do not need an intention for the salah, but your intention for the wudu is also sufficient for the salah. So I said to the brother, I said to you, well, what's the problem? Because as you and I know, that there is a valid opinion in the Hanafi madhab. Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he mentions that one intention, especially for the salah, the intention that you use for the wudu can be used also for the salah. This is something that is wadih. It's something that the ulama, they don't differ about. It's there in his books. And I myself even went to the books to make sure that it was actually there. So once I found it, and I looked at a few of the evidences of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, there is some logic behind it. But then it became problematic for majority of ulama, because there were a lot of problematic issues in specific ahadith and ayat that said otherwise, that said you need an intention for wudu, then you need another intention for the salah, then you need an intention for each and every act of worship. And this is the opinion of the majority of ulama. So there's no issue here. The problem with this brother, brothers and sisters, is that this imam came with an issue. And it was a fiqh issue. And he came with his evidences in front of the community. The first question that you want to ask yourself is, did this imam say anything wrong or against the Quran and the Sunnah of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? This was my question to the brother. And so the brother says, I don't know. So I said to him, let me tell you that these are the three opinions of the three madhahib, and this is the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa. However, I told him that with wisdom, when you study fiqh, this is why the ulama, they say that fiqh is the ilmul adhkiya. It is the knowledge for the person who has intelligence. Why is it so crucial for a person to be intelligent when you study fiqh? Because fiqh is not something that you only restrict yourself to studying out of a book. But fiqh is something you need to have wisdom in knowing when and how to implement fiqh. You cannot just stand up in front of an audience and say this is halal and this is haram and not understand the shades in between. And only a person who has wisdom in fiqh knows how to do this. That's why very few people, brothers and sisters, you all are witnesses to this. Very few people that we know actually understand the science of fiqh. And in addition to that, actually understand how to preach and teach and implement fiqh. So there wasn't an issue, but the problem was that this brother here heard something strange. So he says to me, I don't ever want to go back to this masjid again. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Why would you make such a statement because you differ on a fiqh issue? Why would you break yourself from the community because of an issue like this? As we mentioned to you, brothers and sisters, there were evidences for this opinion. Even though the majority said otherwise, there was evidence for it. And I said to the brother, I said to him, fear Allah. Because you can still differ in fiqh and at the end of the day be brothers and sisters with each other. There was once a time when Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah debated with an individual. And he debated with this individual to the extent that the man became upset with Imam al-Shafi'i. So the man walked away. Imam al-Shafi'i grabbed the person and said, can't we still be brothers and differ at the same time? And so brothers and sisters, just ask yourselves, how many times have you heard an opinion that sounded strange? How many times have you heard something or you witnessed a practice that was very different than how you grew up, very different from your culture, very different than what your mom and dad and the shuyukh have taught you? But the point here is, brothers and sisters, that whenever you hear something about our religion, all you must care about is that whatever that person says, he backs it up with قال الله تعالى وقال رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Once you have these two things, then you're always in the safe ground, insha'Allah ta'ala. Number two, the second manner is that we must try to dig deep in our hearts to admit our faults. Admit when we know we did something wrong. And this is the number one way to erase kibr, to erase that pridefulness, to erase within your heart that you will always know better than the other person. Because this is exactly what Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, that He hates the mutakabbirin, that He hates the person who has that pridefulness in his heart. Once there was a time when Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma, they got into a dispute, they got into an argument. And Abu Bakr said something to Umar and got him upset. So Umar walked away. And Umar kept walking and walking. So Abu Bakr at that very moment, he realized what he said was wrong. He realized that he made a mistake. So he runs after Umar radiallahu an. Umar gave him his back. And Umar walked all the way to his home and closed the door, closed the curtain in front of Abu Bakr. When Abu Bakr saw this, he ran to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he remained silent and he started to cry. He couldn't even speak to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so he just sat there. Eventually, later on, Umar gathered himself and he came out of his home and he came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he told him what happened. He said, Ya Rasulullah, this is what happened between me and Abu Bakr, and this is what he said to me, and this is what I did to him. The Prophet ﷺ looks at Umar and became extremely upset. And became extremely upset. And he looked at the rest of the companions that were there and he said to them, leave my companions alone. Imagine he's saying this to the companions themselves. And he's saying, leave my companions alone. Leave my companions alone. What is he saying here? He's saying to the companions, don't have these things, don't have these problems tied between yourselves. Leave each other alone. If you're wrong, admit it and continue with your lives as normal. And then the Prophet ﷺ looks at everyone and says, when I initially came to you, I said that I was Rasulullah and you said I was a liar. Except Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr said, Ya Rasulullah, you are the truthful one. So leave him alone and leave one another alone. And if there is a problem or a fault, admit it. Look what Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, look what he did. The moment he realized that something was not right, he ran after Umar. And the moment Umar gave him his back, he sat there in front of Rasulullah and he cried himself. He couldn't even speak, he couldn't even admit himself to him. When the Prophet ﷺ heard Umar's story, Abu Bakr saw it from a distance. And he ran up to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, it was my fault, it was me. I was the one who did this. So he takes all of the blame. He doesn't say, Umar said so and so to me, that's why I reacted. He doesn't try to justify this in any way. He takes all of the blame for himself. Brothers and sisters, any single time in your life, you know you did something wrong, you have one of two choices that the ulama advise us. Either you admit it to yourself, but if it involves someone else, admit it to them and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive you. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to cleanse you. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to erase kibr and prideness from our hearts. Number three. Number three is a very important one. And this is based on an observation even from myself, many of the other instructors, many of the other du'at, and many of you here today. And that is part of the etiquettes that you must hold on to, is looking after one's appearance. Looking after your appearance, how you look. There is an important narration by Jabir ibn Abdullah radiyallahu anhuma. He narrates that once the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam was coming over to my house. And as he was coming over to my house, he walked by a man that had hair that was very messy. And the Prophet ﷺ looks at this man and says, don't you have a comb that you can keep yourself tidy? There's another narration where the Prophet ﷺ saw a man that had clothing that was very dirty and it had an odor to it. And he says to the man, "Don't you have any water that you can wash your clothes?" Then the Prophet ﷺ in a third narration says, "Your hair, honor it. Honor the hair on your head." So when you see yourself, brothers and sisters, and I speak even to myself, when you look in the mirror and you see that your hair is disheveled, it's messy, it doesn't look tidy, remember this goes against the practice and the etiquette of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In addition to that, the Prophet ﷺ, being a man, always would wear perfume. There was once where Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhuma, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ's hand smelled so sweet, it felt as though that he took his hand and he placed it in a bucket of perfume. That's how sweet only his hand smells. It was said that the Prophet ﷺ one day, he went over to his wife Salama radiyallahu anha. And when Salama welcomed him in the home, she took a piece of leather and she placed it on the ground. And as you know, leather is impermeable, so there's no water that can absorb through leather. Now all of us, we know that in the desert it's very hot. So the Prophet ﷺ laid down and he slept there. And as a result, he started to sweat. The next morning, Salama saw that there was a pool of sweat on this piece of leather. So she goes back into a part of her home and she gets a little bottle of perfume. And she empties that bottle. She throws it away. And she takes the sweat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and she pours it into the bottle and she uses it as her perfume for the rest of her life. Brothers and sisters, why do I tell you this? I am certain, insha'Allah ta'ala, that these words that you just heard, it must have hit your heart in some way. There was a part in your heart at this very moment, I'm confident, insha'Allah, to say this in front of you. It hit home somewhere. It probably made you think about something. It probably, insha'Allah, make you think that tomorrow when you wake up, you're going to make sure that your appearance is beautiful. You're going to make sure that insha'Allah your odor is pleasant. You're going to make sure that when others they see you, they will smile every time they see you because of your appearance. This is one of the most easiest and most fundamental practices that we can implement. And this is a part of our deen. It is a part of our iman. It is a part of being Muslim. Number four, brothers and sisters, is the generosity of each and every one of us. You must be generous with each other. You must have a heart that has some level of givingness in it. And the reason why I say this is once there was a time when Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, he was sitting in a path and he had a stone tied around his stomach. Why did he have this stone? It's because he was starving. He had no food, and this was the way to constrict that hunger in his stomach. So he sat in the middle of the path. Abu Bakr walks by, so Abu Huraira stops him and says, "Ya Abu Bakr, I have a question to you about a verse in the Quran." So he asks him the question. Abu Bakr gives him the answer and he walks away. In the narration it mentions, I was hoping that Abu Bakr would invite me to come along with him so that I could get something to eat. But it didn't happen. Umar radiyallahu anh is the second person that walks by in that path. And when he walks by, Abu Huraira stops him and says, "Ya Umar, I have a question to you about a verse in the Quran." Umar gives him the answer and he walks away. And Abu Huraira says, I was hoping he would invite me to come along so that I could have something to eat. The third person that walks by in this path is none other than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now look what he does. He sees Abu Huraira from a distance. And right away he notices that something is wrong with his face. He notices that Abu Huraira looks a bit pale. So he starts to smile. And he says, "Ya Aba Huraira, And he responds and he says, Labbaik ya Rasulullah, I'm here at your service. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam says, come with me. And he invites him over to his house. And when Abu Huraira goes over to his house, the Prophet ﷺ sees a container of milk inside of it. And so he says to Aisha, who brought this milk here? Aisha says that somebody gave it to you as a gift, Ya Rasulullah. And so the Prophet ﷺ takes that milk and he gives it to Abu Huraira. But it doesn't stop there. He tells Abu Huraira, call the people of Ahlul Sufa and invite him over to the house. Ahlul Sufa were the guests of Islam. They were one of the poorest people in Medina. So the Prophet ﷺ says, bring all of them to my house and give them this milk. Abu Huraira starts talking to himself and he says, I thought I was more deserving of this. I thought I was the one who needed this. But I can't disobey Rasulullah, so I obey. He gives it to the people of Ahlul Sufa. He serves each of them until the milk is done. The Prophet ﷺ looks at Abu Huraira and says, you're the only one left. So Abu Huraira says, Na'am, that's right, Ya Rasulullah. I'm the only one that didn't get anything. Prophet ﷺ says, sit down. He takes his fingers and he places it in that container. And he smiles at Abu Huraira and he says to him, drink. So Abu Huraira starts to drink and drink and drink this milk until he's satisfied. He gives it back to Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ says, no, continue drinking. So he continues to drink until he's reached his capacity. And he gives it to the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ says, continue drinking. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, I can't fit anything else in me anymore. I can't drink anymore, I am full. And the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam drinks the rest of the milk himself. Be generous, brothers and sisters. Because wallahi, the ulama, they say that generosity is the number one avenue that humbles the heart and softens you when you deal with the people around you. Insha'Allah, we will conclude with the final point in the second part of the khutbah. أقول ما تسمعون وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. The final point that I leave you with, brothers and sisters, is a crucial one. This is the only one that you can take from today, insha'Allah fayakfi. It is going to be enough. And that is to control the tongue. I won't tell you that it is haram because we know this. We know that if we are loose or careless with our tongues and we backbite or say things that are haram, we know the result or the consequence behind this. I will only narrate to you one hadith that is found in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad and the Sunan of At-Tirmidhi. The Prophet ﷺ tells us that every day when you wake up in the morning, your body limbs, they humble themselves to your tongue. And they say to the tongue, Ittaqillah, fear Allah. Because if you are good, then we will also be good. But if you are crooked and disobedient, then that is going to be the result of all of us. And that really paints a picture, brothers and sisters, that if a person has a clean tongue, then their actions are beautiful and clean. But if a person has otherwise, then thus that is the result of their actions. Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, he mentions, it's so ajib, it's so strange, that a person can stay away from stealing, can stay away from zina, can stay away from crimes, can stay away from all of these major problems in their life, but still cannot control their tongue. It's just something to really think about. It's just something to really hit home. And it's just something to really understand that in your heart, don't ever trivialize it. And so these are the words that I leave you with, brothers and sisters. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal that these 5 etiquettes that are mentioned to you today, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to affirm them in our hearts, to affirm them in our actions, and to affirm them in our way of life. And all of the beautiful etiquettes that beautify the Muslim, we ask Allah Azza wa Jal affirm them in our actions, affirm them in our hearts, and at least affirm them in our intentions. We send peace and blessings to our Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. كما أمرنا سبحانه وتعالى في تنزيله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك قريب سميع مجيب الدعوات. اللهم انصر إخواننا في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في كل مكان يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا في كل مكان يا أكرم الأكرمين. اللهم إننا نسألك الجنة وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل، ونعوذ بك من النار وما قرب إليها من قول وعمل. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.